Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics on this Sunday. Early voting begins this week in Indiana's primary election, including a race getting national attention. We're talking about 1st Congressional District in Northwest Indiana. National Republicans have targeted that seat in the bid to win back the House, and one of the candidates hoping to win the nomination is former LaPorte Mayor Blair Milo. And let's welcome in Blair Milo now, a candidate for Indiana's 1st District in the U.S. House, a seat that's getting national attention from Republicans all across the country. Blair, good to see you. Let's start with this question here. What do you think the northwest corner of Indiana, why do you think it's not being represented the way you wish in the House of Representatives?
Well, I believe that we need to fight back against a number of the policies that are being advanced that are so harmful for Hoosiers in Northwest Indiana, but really for American families all across the country. That when we see record levels of inflation that are impacting our families to the tune of about $276 of increased cost per month last year, and that was last year's numbers, that's only continued to rise, that we're paying more than ever for prices at the pump. And the cost that brings to not only our families, but our businesses and towards our economic opportunity is deeply troubling and angering in many different ways, because I know we have so much more opportunity, and particularly up in this corner of the state where we have really dynamic industries, we have a great geographic advantage, but we're not able to see the kinds of opportunity that we could because of these harmful policies that are limiting our economic growth and are very harmful, particularly for the families who aren't able to absorb these kinds of costs when wages are not rising at the same pace as inflation.
Sure. Since you brought up gas, I'm going to jump around a little bit and go to this. The president announced this week, as you very well know, that he's releasing 1 million barrels per day from the strategic petroleum reserves. Is that enough action, in your opinion? What would you like to see the president do if this isn't enough for you?
That's not enough action. And I also think that's deeply troubling that we're continuing to tap into our strategic reserves when we have other sources of energy that we could be using towards to advance an energy independence for our country. And it's also important that we think about what energy independence looks like for nations all across the world, so that then we have much more stability as we see so much volatility in the global energy marketplace, and not to mention how that impacts our national security. And when we think about what those options are, that's a direct impact on opportunity for Northwest Indiana, for jobs that we have here, whether we're talking about steel jobs or whether refinery jobs, that these are all direct impacts to our neighborhoods up here in Northwest Indiana, as well as an opportunity cost for our country. And we can also look towards different types of innovations that we could be advancing and the research that we could be doing if we didn't have the same kinds of restrictions and federal regulations that are in place, limiting that kind of research. So any number of different avenues that we need to be taking rather than depleting our strategic reserves.
Since this is the first time we're talking, how would you describe yourself to our viewers? Are you a Trump Republican?
I do believe that there were many very important policies that were advanced over President Trump's administration, and continuing to fight for security at our border, particularly, is a key element that we need to address. That there are any number of international policies. I think that the president was very good about raising the alarm on the challenges that China and the threats that China represents to our country, and particularly to our economy. And so I think that there are a number of policies that we need to continue fighting for, and that we need to return to an era where we were working towards less regulations and ensuring that local government had greater control, and we were putting those decisions back in the hands of individuals and to the government closest to the people.
That being said, Blair, as you very well know, and I don't need to tell you this, but for the folks at home, this is a very highly Democratic area and has been for quite some time. So how do you foresee yourself getting the votes to win this election if you do win the primary?
Well, I would challenge that notion that it's a highly Democratic area, that the data shows us that there have been more and more votes for Republican candidates at every level of government over the last decade or so. And so I would also point to that Governor Holcomb came within 0.5% of winning the Northwest Indiana district here, which is demonstrating the volume of new Republican votes that are coming forward. And I think it's a mixture of individuals moving into the area. I think it's individuals who are becoming more politically active, and a number of people who are saying that the message coming from the Democratic Party is no longer fitting with the challenges and the pain that they are facing for themselves and their families. And they're looking for different leadership and representation to bring forward opportunity. And that's where we have a great chance to be able to demonstrate that there are very tangible results that people can come and see in the city of LaPorte.
I have one more question before I let you go, and I appreciate you taking some time. Former Vice President and former Indiana Governor Mike Pence laid out his freedom agenda this week. Some of the parts he talks about are tax cuts, increasing energy production, and rolling back regulations. He also pledged to save women's sports, in his opinion, in his words, I should say. Do you support that call and the Indiana bill that calls for banning transgender girls in girls' sports?
Well, I do believe that in a fair playing field. And so I think that it's crucial that we identify the mechanisms and the policies that ensure that fair playing field for all genders. And so I appreciate that the vice president is putting attention towards this, and that the state house is continuing to evaluate then what the policies need to be and who needs to put those policies in place to, as I said, ensure a fair playing field, particularly for women's sports, and recognizing all of the different ingredients that come into that.
So do you disagree with the governor vetoing that bill?
I believe that we need to continue evaluating what the fair playing field is going to look like. And whether that decision needs to lie within a state policy or working with the governing organizations for high school sports, then we need to make sure that those policies are in place so that, again, that every student and all genders are getting a fair shot and in competition.
Okay. Blair Milo, candidate for Indiana's 1st District in the U.S. House. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
And next week, we will talk with another of those Republican candidates, Jennifer Ruth Green. We also have made several offers over the past year to current office holder Democrat Frank Mervan to appear here on All Indiana Politics. His office has refused all of those invitations. All right, coming up, getting ready for 4th round of COVID shots. Why the White House says there may not be enough money to cover everyone. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we talk about politics and COVID-19. Now, just in the past few weeks, Governor Eric Holcomb has ended Indiana's public health emergency. The state has the fewest COVID hospitalizations since the pandemic began. And Indiana now offering second booster shots for anyone 50 and older and those at high risk. Now the White House, though, pushing lawmakers for more money right now to help prevent another possible virus surge this fall. Dr. Cameron Webb, thank you for joining us today. Indiana, as you very well know, has dropped its health emergency. Most states have lifted their restrictions. So I guess a good question to start is there still some concern, some genuine concern? Is there still a threat for COVID across the United States?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's any public health expert across the state of Indiana and across the country will tell you there's still a threat from COVID-19. I think the fact of the matter is cases, hospitalizations, and deaths are down, and they're significantly lower levels. And that's a testament to the tools we've developed over the last 2 years. The tests, the treatments, the vaccines that have helped to keep people safe. That's how we've made this progress. And President Biden describes it as a wartime effort. As with any war, you don't, stop supporting that war when a battle is turned in your favor. And that's exactly where we are here. The war is certainly not won. The battles against Omicron in particular has turned in our favor. We want to maintain that progress and continue to support. That's the reason why we need to continue to invest in this effort.
Yeah, so the White House wants more funds, more money for COVID response. What would that money pay for?
And I think that the country wants more support. What's interesting is that there's tremendous support nationally for ongoing support for tests, for treatments, and for vaccines in particular, the critical medical supplies that are really the heartbeat of this response. People want to be able to know if they have COVID-19 or not. And without this funding, manufacturers aren't going to continue to make, tests in the midst of a time when cases are low and demand is lower. And so what will happen is you'll have fewer tests that are available. And then if and when we have a surge in cases, and people start buying tests to keep track, we're going to not have enough supply to meet the need. We've had those moments before. We don't want to repeat that dynamic.
Yeah.
Another example is the life-saving treatments. We procured 20 million of the oral antiviral Paxlovid, but there's certainly far more people in the country who would benefit from that medication. We don't have the ability to purchase more quite yet. And so then finally, the idea of developing a variant-specific vaccine. If and when we have a variant that escapes the immunity conferred by the vaccines that over 217 million Americans have already gotten, if we need to have a new vaccine that's specific to that variant, we need to be investing in that today. And we released the National COVID-19 Preparedness Plan. We outlined all of these things, all of these preparedness approaches that are going to be critical to the safety of the American people. And what we're asking is that Congress steps up to support that preparedness mindset as we continue to fight this pandemic.
That being said, if there is no additional money, can you afford free boosters for everyone this fall?
Yeah, the fact of the matter is no, we can't. We can't afford, and by boosters, certainly we've already procured enough vaccines for first and second shots for all folks here in the country. We've procured enough for boosters for everyone. It's that next line of boosters that we're currently discussing, this idea of fourth shots, whether that's for older adults or whether that's for the immunocompromised. As we get into the fall, we're not going to have enough supply if we don't continue to invest. And that's just part of the equation. That's certainly an important part. But again, this idea of preparing for future potential variants, we lose some of that ability. This idea of having adequate treatments for folks who do get COVID-19, we lose that ability as we head into the fall. I do think that we would be putting ourselves in a really tough spot for the fall if we don't make this investment. And I think at that point, legislators will be held accountable by the folks who elected them and saying, why didn't you make the investment? Why didn't you, ensure the resources on the front end so we weren't left in a tough spot waiting for those resources to arrive when we're already at a bad moment.
Are you worried, Dr. Webb, that another COVID wave is coming?
I'm always worried that another COVID wave. I work on the front lines. I'm an internal medicine doctor and a hospitalist. So I've been in the hospital taking care of patients for the original wave of COVID patients, the Alpha wave, the Delta wave, and now Omicron. I've seen the impact that it has. I know that we can do better at preparing. We're seeing in Europe that there have been an increase in cases. We know that BA2 sublineage of Omicron is here in the United States. It's about 35% of our cases. Right now, we have the benefit of the fact that 217 million people are vaccinated. We have the benefit of the reality that so many people recently had COVID. That's not going to serve us forever. We know there's going to be a point in time when a lot of that immunologic protection isn't going to protect communities in the same way. And especially communities with lower rates of vaccination, you're going to see that risk return. And so I think from a purely public health perspective, the risk remains. And it's a matter of us using the tools we have to minimize that risk to communities. So I'm not imminently worried that a wave is coming in the next couple of days or even weeks, but I am always worried about our state of preparedness for whatever may be coming our way. We've been caught flat-footed before. I don't want to see us do it again.
Thank you for all that you do, Dr. Cameron Webb, Senior Advisor to the White House COVID response team. We appreciate you taking some time, sir.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Take All Indiana Politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. Part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
And welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome back Democrat Drew Anderson and Republican Whitley Yates. Good to see you both. Let's start with the Supreme Court nomination, shall we? Senator Todd Young, as you very well know, confirming Friday that he will vote no on Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination on the Senate floor. Let's get reaction from both of you now, starting with Drew. Drew, go ahead.
I mean, we Democrats knew that he was going to say no from the get-go. He's a Washington, D.C. yes man. He will always take his cues from Mitch McConnell, and everything he did beforehand was performative. But I think at the end of the day, Democrats are excited because this is another promise kept by President Biden. And it's a win for us, and it's a win for diversity, and we're excited about that.
Whitley, your response.
You know, one of the interesting things I think about this Supreme Court nominee and some of the questions around her appointment was if she could interpret the Constitution. And a year ago, when she was asked about interpreting the Constitution, she spoke about not having the experience to do that. And so that, I think, is something that people were really looking at. When you go back and listen to her testimony from being appointed to other courts, and you hear how she spoke about whether or not she felt like it was a living constitution and things of that nature, being appointed to the Supreme Court, where you would have to do that consistently, I think is what we were really worried about. And so I'm not surprised currently with who has said that they would confirm and would not confirm. As you remember, when President Trump was nominating to the Supreme Court, almost all the Democrats voted no, except for I think one. So this is par for the course, I think, in the political spectrum that we're on.
Go ahead, Drew.
Well, we voted no on all of Trump's nominees, especially Amy Coney Barrett, because she had no experience on the court. And Ketanji has a plethora of serving, and she outweighs a lot of the nominees that President Trump put up, especially Amy Coney Barrett.
Want to respond to that, Whitley, and then we'll move on?
I mean, the truth of the matter is, when we're talking about the Supreme Court, which has to interpret the Constitution, it would be really great to have someone who has experience doing just that.
Okay.
And she does.
All right, we'll leave it there. The president this week, as you guys know, announced that he will release 1 million barrels of oil from the strategic reserves to bring down gas prices. Whitley, this is the president taking action to bring down prices, no?
Absolutely not. It is
Why?
completely and utterly performative. And it's almost as if you created an issue and you created a problem by your leadership, and then you're attempting to mitigate by saying, "Ooh, look what I'm doing here," when you really put us in this position and in this place. The truth of the matter is, a million barrels a day is nothing. It's but a drop in the bucket when we literally consume in this country 20 times that a day. And so since he got into office, we've heard nothing but Biden talk about ending fossil fuels. He's had an entire attack on this industry, and now he needs this industry and investments in this industry to keep going. And he's confused as to why he can't find people to invest. And then he announces that he's going to increase taxes. So he's going to increase taxes. He's asking for other people to invest. And he's had a very strong disdain for the fossil fuel industry.
I know Drew wants to respond, and I'll let Drew respond, but I will push back on you here for a second, Whitley, because as you know, there are 9,000 permits available right now that have been given out. So why aren't they drilling?
Because not every lease contains oil and natural gas. And some of these permits are non-producing, and they represent untapped sources. Companies are businesses, and they're trying to find and build what's right for them. You can't say, well, they're out here and come get them, and then say, I'm actually going to tax this industry even more. Like, you cannot de-incentivize and then wonder why people are not taking advantage of this offering. It's asinine to me.
All right, Drew, your response on what President Biden did this week.
Yeah, I mean, he's once again fulfilling a promise to Americans, saying that he's doing what he can to make lives better for Americans, especially Hoosiers. I mean, from yesterday came Quinnipiac that 6 in 10 Americans do not blame Biden for these gas prices, and it's because folks realize that gas prices are high because Russia invaded Ukraine, and it created a global energy issue across the globe. And so this is going to bring down gas prices about 15 to 20 cents. Garrett Bergquist reported it here in Wish. And the better part about all this, too, is that Indiana Democrats, we want to actually temporarily halt the gas tax here, too, and further bring prices here. But unfortunately, folks on the other side said no. And so they're going to have to live with that record, and we'll campaign on that.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, we'll see what happens. Listen, good to talk to you. We'll talk soon. Thank you very much. Yep. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll be right back.
Thanks, y'all.
All right. Thank you for joining us for this weekend for All Indiana Politics. Remember, we'll be back here next Sunday and every Sunday morning at 9:30. We'll be watching the Senate Judiciary Committee meeting on Monday. That will be for a vote on advancing the Supreme Court nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson to to the full Senate. We'll have much more on that throughout the week and on wishtv.com. Also remember, the Indians kicking off their season this week. Good to see baseball back in Indianapolis and across the nation. Have a great rest of your weekend.